How does a slave rise up the ranks to become an honorable lawman?
Who is this infamous Mr. Sundown?
Is there a place for Bass at home after being away from his family so often?
And what is the blood cost of duty and loyalty?
Find out as Red and Red Real Reviews puts on their cowboy boots to explore the first season of Paramount's anthology series, Lawmen, Bass Reeves.
In her face, the mirror of your
I have 2.8% body fat. My body's like a microchip. A grain of sand could destroy it.
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
Someone will die.
Of fun.
And of murder.
So I told him to mark everything with the international symbol for gender. And,
Leslie, I typed your symptoms into the thing up here, and it says you could have network connectivity problems.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
My body's a microchip.
It's Halloween. That is really, really good timing.
Make believe I'm everywhere, giving them a light.
My brain is on fire. I'm dying.
I should have been more specific.
I think it happens over a long period of time, just like piece by piece, you know?
I once forgot to brush my teeth for 5 weeks.
There is no middle ground.
I am the one who knocks.
Oh my God. The microchip has been compromised.
I want you to stand out. I want all of you to be as different as you can possibly be.
Written on the pages is the answer to a never-ending story.
Okay, welcome back to the 8th episode of Red and Red Real Reviews.
The Ocho.
Yes. So this is kind of a special one as we're, about to go into the holidays shortly. So I think we kind of thought by covering this one, because it's a Taylor Sheridan show, we were like, okay, is this Taylor Sheridan show going to redeem Taylor Sheridan as far as Special Ops Lioness that we covered earlier this season? So that was kind of what we had on our mind at first, in the back of our mind. Is this going to be on the list of the good Taylor Sheridan shows or the bad Taylor Sheridan shows?
And ironically enough, Lioness was something we were enjoying, and it was building up, and then the bottom fell out from the ship. And this one maybe had a little bit of an inverse effect.
Yes. Yeah. Whereas Lioness had so much potential, but then was disappointing. This one, it was sort of a struggle from the beginning for me.
Yeah.
Just very, drawn out, a lot of characters. I don't know if it's just the whole Western format in general, because, Taylor Sheridan's other shows, 1883, 1923 are all Western based, but I was reeled in by those. But this for some reason, like the true Western format, this kind of reminded me of the types of movies that I've seen my dad watch, John Wayne movies and things like that, where I was just bored off the cuff.
And you know what? It could have been a bit of a square peg in a round hole, because it did have a Western look to it, but it really wasn't a Western scene set. It was set in the South. It was set in Reconstruction after the Civil War. So like it did have a bit of a Western look, but it really wasn't a Western theme to it. You know what I mean?
Right. A spin on the Western, since this is actually based on a true story. And the reason I knew that is because I saw ads on Facebook that were like, listen to this true story and watch this story unfold. So I was like, wow, okay. And then, of course, when you see the opening credits, it says that it's based on 2 different books. So yeah, from the beginning, we were keeping in mind that, okay, this is a Taylor Sheridan show. Is it going to be good? And then also that it's based on a true story. So, I mean, not knowing the true story of Bass Reeves, we're not really, as viewers, we're not able to separate what's fact versus fiction.
Yeah. And So you definitely do a better job than me with looking up the backstories of these shows we cover, where I'm just like, oh, this looks good. Let me go in blind. But the thing, I guess Taylor Sheridan is kind of having a gravitas effect to his work because you wrote down a bunch of the big names that are in this, and so
Oh
maybe
yeah.
maybe he's just getting this reputation now where the big names kind of flock to him. Says, "Hey, I'm doing this show," and the actors line up.
Oh, for sure. I definitely think so. So we had a lot of famous faces in this one. So I mean, these are not really listed in any particular order of importance, but probably should mention the big legendary actors first. So we have Donald Sutherland, father of Kiefer Sutherland. He played Judge Parker. You'll recognize that face anywhere.
Yeah.
He's been in the biz for a long time. Then you have someone like Dennis Quaid, who played Cheryl, which I was a little conflicted because I'm like, is Cheryl a girl's name? I didn't know that Cheryl was a unisex name back in the day.
Yeah.
So I found that interesting.
Yeah, and I found it interesting with those two. Obviously, those are two big established names, both in their own right and just their last name. Because of father, son, siblings, that sort of thing. But with the two of them, it was interesting that they both had more supporting roles, even though their presence in the story was kind of bigger than the roles they portrayed.
Right. Yeah, that was not that David Oyelowo is an unknown, but yeah, that was interesting that the legendary actors that have been around a long time were in the supporting roles and he was in the lead role. And prior to he has a vast filmography, but the last I think big thing he was in was what was that? 2012 or so, 2015. He was nominated for an award.
David Oyelowo?
Yes.
He was
Oyelowo.
Yeah, I'm not even going to attempt to say it
I'm
anymore. I tried to
butcher
say
it,
it once.
yeah.
He the one I had to look up because I recognize his face, and when I looked up his filmography, the biggest one I saw was Selma. He played Martin Luther King.
Yes, okay, that was another big one. It must have been, was it The Butler that he was in?
Oh, I think I saw
It might have
that.
been,
Yeah, I think I saw
it was
that.
either The Butler or like 12 Years a Slave, but he was definitely in talks, nominated for the big actor award several years ago, probably almost a decade ago at this point. So he's definitely been around, but he's a very good actor, but I don't think he's as famous as these other guys, but he had to hold it together as the lead role. So you had these legendary players supporting him. A couple others, there was Shea Wingham played George Reeves, and usually he was in Perry Mason. He was also in Boardwalk Empire, so I immediately recognized him. I was like, I know that guy. He's been on multiple HBO shows, so I'm wondering if he's going to kind of get, a lot of these actors are going to get caught in the Taylor Sheridan web, which he likes to reuse actors too.
Yeah.
So that should be interesting. These ones with other networks that feature in a lot of their shows, if they'll be in more of his shows. So we do, speaking of ones that are in other Taylor Sheridan shows, Garrett Hedlund. I don't know if you watched Tulsa King, great show. I would recommend if you haven't, but Garrett Hedlund is from Tulsa King.
I know it's a great show and I want to watch it since I was a little late to get on the bandwagon, but I just figured I'd wait until we were ready to cover the new season and I just binged through all of it.
Well, I don't know when that new season is coming out, but I've been anxiously waiting for it because that was such a good show. Yeah. I'm just, eager for more. So Garrett Hedlund from Tulsa King, he was only in episode 3. I think he actually played a character named Garrett, which was crazy.
Garrett Montgomery.
So, Yeah, so he had a little feature in episode 3, and then I think someone shot him or took him out, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that was the end of him. So he wasn't in it for very long.
He
And
didn't
then the
didn't last very long.
last famous face was I didn't look up the actor's name, unfortunately. So the Arthur, the kid that was introduced to Sally, was immediately, she, had this crush on him and developed a close relationship with him. That is one of the younger Randalls from This Is Us. So, which is another show that we used to watch and talk about. None that we covered here, it was already over, but so that's another connection to our coverage of things.
Yeah, and I like seeing him. Like I knew I recognized him. I just could not put it out. So when I saw your notes and you wrote it down, I'm like, that's right. That's Randall. It's little Randall, or teenage Randall, I should say.
He was like the young teen Randall, maybe like 12 or 13, right?
Yeah. The one that's actually in one of our intros.
Yeah.
I think. And the funny part about Garrett Hedlund is, because I haven't started Tulsa King yet, excoriate me in the comments, if you will, viewers. But so I don't think of him that. The first thing I think of with Garrett Hedlund is this movie he did with Mark Wahlberg called Four Brothers, which is this kind of like dopey misfit toys, four guys raised together as brothers, and it was with him, Mark Wahlberg, Tyrese, Andre 3000. Yeah,
yes.
So it's like these four kind of, again, square pegs and round holes that kind of came together as movies. So I always kind of think of that dopey role that he had in that.
I didn't even think of that, but that was during my video store days. That was what, like 2004 to 2006?
Yeah, probably in that range, because I know I know it was during the college days when it came out.
Oh wow, so he's been around a long time.
Yeah. That's probably why I didn't recognize him. He's a lot older now.
Yeah. So okay, so once you started watching, what were your first impressions? As you watched, was there anything that kind of struck you, surprised you about the fact that this was a true story?
Well, actually, no. So again, I didn't look that up at first. But I also watched it thinking it was just, it seemed like an adaptation, or just one of those things where the producers pick out historical information and kind of coalesce a fictional story out of it. But it is interesting to know that it was based on a story, especially in a Reconstruction era where the country is just moving on from slavery and emancipation and that sort of thing. And kind of, Judge Parker didn't exactly come off like a typical abolitionist, but for him to put, obviously, a black man in a position of power like a federal marshal, kind of had a bit of an essence of progression through action.
Right. Yeah, that was a big deal. And I think, the first thing that I looked up is, okay, so I wanted to know the stats. So the reason that Bass Reeves is so significant is because he was the first Black U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi. So I was actually reading too that he was a partial inspiration for the Lone Ranger, which that was a character on TV, like in black and white TV days, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, he was a partial inspiration. They took some nuggets from what he did to inspire the Lone Ranger. And David Oyelowo, we'll call him David O. He wanted to tell this story for 8 years. So he was, I don't know at what, I'm assuming Taylor Sheridan is somebody who was attached, as executive producer in the recent past, the past couple of years. But it seems like David O has been really passionate about getting this story out there and getting this story made, since it was based on those couple of books. And I think it's a whole book series. This was just covered 2 of the books. So I don't know if I know the fact that it's, again, this was in Reconstruction times. So this was a different time. but and maybe it's just because I have a hard time with gory things, but I was a little surprised by like the violence in this. And point being, because within the first 5 minutes of the actual show, there was not only like tomahawk violence, which is like really graphic, but there was also scalping, which is like another one thing that like gives me nightmares at night.
That one, so one of my favorite movies growing up was Last of the Mohicans.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of that kind of early American violence and scalping, because that was how you prove that you vanquish your opponent, so to speak. So like that kind of stuff doesn't so much bother me, and it also feels appropriate to the era they set the product in. So I mean, there's also a part of me that like appreciates more of a genuine type of effort to put things in, even if they may make yourself and others kind of shiver a little bit, to kind of make it more authentic to the times.
Yeah, it definitely started off with a bang, but I was, closing my eyes within the first 5 minutes, like, oh, this is the stuff that just, sticks with me and scars me. Like I can remember a movie I watched with my grandma 25 years ago, and there was a scalping scene, and it just horrified me.
Yeah.
So
the other thing that kind of made me think a little bit as far as that time period was like seeing how things played out in Judge Parker's courtroom, whereas justice was handed out back then, because there's no forensic teams, there's no CSI, so they were kind of seemed to be deliberated by more societal standards. There was one scene in the beginning when there was a young man on trial for murder, and I guess he killed someone for he was stealing, and he killed in self-defense, but he was stealing to try and help his family,
right.
But he was kind of from lesser depths of economic society. So Judge Parker was like, nope, you should have learned, you need to learn your lessons, you're going to prison, yada yada yada. And then at the end, Bess kills the chef out of just nothing more than, why did you let this lady go? I know we like her, I know she's of our race, but she committed a crime, and that was our fare to bring her in, and you just let her go. And he blows him away. So and he goes on trial, and Parker lets him go. So there was almost kind of this thought process back then, like, okay, maybe justice was not always handed out on the most transparent terms, for lack of a better
Also,
word.
I mean, it shows when you know someone, and someone of a very powerful position, they'll still go to bat for you. I mean, as far as corruption,
yeah,
we'll talk about it a bit later when we talk about quotes, because there's there's a part with a side character who kind of brings up the point that outlaws and lawmen are not all that different. And we kind of saw a little bit of a glimpse of that, didn't we, with the Parker's verdict, kind of letting Bass just kind of do what he wanted to do. He pulled the trigger out of just
anger,
out of
frustration,
anger,
like, what are you doing?
and it was a spontaneous decision, and he didn't pay for that. So yeah, I mean, it kind of brings up the point of corruption, or having certain people on your side with the law that can get you out of these little pickles.
Which in 80 years or 100 years or whatever hasn't necessarily gone away all that much.
No, we still have situations where judges let people go or get off easy because there's an association with the family, things like that people don't necessarily know about.
Or some of this.
Exactly. Money talks.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention too, obviously it is a different time, so there's violence, and they didn't paint a rosy picture of that. They kind of left it as it was. Same thing is it's hard to witness injustice with things like that, and with slavery. Anytime you watch a period piece where they have slavery, it's hard to watch that and to just imagine that that was how things really were. But it was still definitely, and I'm sure they put it in for shock value, the fact that Bass's wife, Jenny, literally pushes out a baby and she's expected to work the next morning.
Yeah. You were fine. You didn't need any drugs. You popped that kid out like it was a rocket ship.
Right. Like it was almost laughable how crazy it was. But I mean, I'm assuming that would not have been out of the ordinary back then. That
Probably
was just
not.
how people were treated. And it's hard to watch, but it's still very shocking.
Yeah, it is a little shocking. I mean, also you said that in real life they had 11 children between the two. So, I mean, I guess at a certain point they just came out easy.
Yeah. I think after, I would say 3 or 4, it's probably just.
Yeah. Oh, there's another one.
You breathe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to get graphic or anything about childhood.
Yeah, really.
But,
anyway.
Yeah, anyway. So in your mind, what were some of the major themes of Bass Reeves' story? What were the sort of things that came up as central themes that he struggled with?
I'll double down on one of yours, and that is work versus family, because obviously Bass becoming Marshal took him away from his farm a lot. And, especially the one point they particularly focused on where he was supposed to take Sally to the carnival and he gets called away. I think that may have even been the Jackson Cole case that they had to trek off to Texas on. So he was supposed to come home for a while, stay there, enjoy the time, take his daughter to this festival. And Judge Parker said, nope, here's your next assignment. You got to go off to Texas. And at first he said no, but he wound up going anyway out of duty to his position. So, and that definitely put a strain on the familial relationship. Not only that he had with Jenny, he didn't really see, and it was funny because a little later on, you saw that Sally still kind of had loyalty to her father, but in the moment you could see the visible disappointment on her face when he wasn't going to be able to take her to the carnival.
Right. And I think, maybe we can't relate to him being a U.S. Marshal. There's only certain people that can relate to that. And it's a different job than it is now. But I think a lot of people can relate to it's an age-old thing, the work versus family. It's like you saw a little bit in Bass Reeves, because Jenny, and even though they had all those kids, they were enjoying a pretty good life. When they were going out into town and into church, like they had a nice farm, they had a nice home, and they were able to achieve that because of Bass's job. So it was one of those difficult things. He didn't want to be away from his family, but he knew he needed the money. He knew he had to earn for his family. So it's like almost an exchange, do you want to make money or do you want to spend time with your family? It's a hard decision.
And even in the post-emancipation world that this is set in, his family still enjoyed some gravitas to his position. They knew don't mess, the Reeves are kind of untouchable. So they had kind of this air about them that despite this situation with those kids that were kind of terrorizing them a little bit. Overall, there was still kind of this air about the family where they knew they could go out in society and enjoy themselves, which it was probably not what a lot of Black people in the country in that era were experiencing at that time.
Right. I mean, do you think, I would think it's abnormal for a white judge like Judge Parker to have dinner with a Black couple. Like that's, how many jobs, or how many, just in general, how often do you think that's happening? Probably not very often back then. So the fact that they were sitting down to dinner together, that was definitely a show of the status that he got to because of being a marshal.
Yeah, that's especially in the light of seeing what kind of corruption Judge Parker was probably still influenced by, for him to have that more kind of progressive mindset with this is when he's one of my guys. It's not about skin color, it's the fact that we're both agents of the law.
Right, right. And then so another theme, there were a few, but I think work versus family was really the major one. But there also were a couple other sub themes. So one of those I would say is faith versus absence of faith, just because it was called out several times, the fact that Bass Reeves couldn't read, right? He said he couldn't read the good book, but he had it
He
all
knew
up
it.
here.
Yeah.
Right. So he was always a very religious man of faith, and it was kind of funny because a lot of the characters that he came across were the total opposite, especially we'll get to a couple quotes with him and Cheryl. Cheryl was just, that man's a savage, and he obviously doesn't he obviously doesn't believe in any sort of cornerstone of faith. So yeah, you kind of had that constant struggle of Bass over here having a lot of faith, and then other characters coming in just swinging, and they have none.
And even characters that did have that base of them, that faith base in them, but took it in a completely different direction. Like, it was clear at one point that Pierce and Bass both had a belief in a faith system, but Pierce took it in a direction where it's like, oh, they're all killers anyway. Everyone in heaven's a killer, whereas Bass's was more traditional and kind of doing it for the right reasons and moral justification, that sort of thing.
Just doing what's right. And then I mean, this, it's kind of like we both had a little bit of similar thoughts. I don't know how else to word it, but revenge was kind of a theme. Or how you put it, justice. I mean, justice, revenge, like, and the fact that Bass was focused on doing what's right, or what he thought was right at the time. So yeah, that was whether he wanted revenge on certain things, Curtis being shot, or that was, he just wanted he wanted there to be justice at the end of the day.
Yeah, and especially with the Curtis situation, that really haunted him throughout the duration of the show. And it was my interpretation of it in light of the justice aspect was, there were certain things that, and I think you can take aspects of this and apply it to things in more contemporary times, where sometimes justice is something that's doled out via a traditional method, via justice system, whatever the case may be, behind a badge, yada yada yada. Or sometimes it's a situation where, if you want justice, if you want real justice, sometimes you have to take it into your own hands, and you kind of saw it play out in more of a vigilante role.
Yes, you have to kind of take that back alley approach, because that going by the book is not going to get you the justice that you want. So I think that's how it seemed for him. Like, he just acted in ways that he thought was right, and not always right in the eyes of the law.
And in a lot of times when it's you, like, I likened it to a film. Oh, what was it? It was with Jamie Foxx and Gerard Butler. Law-abiding
I know.
citizen. Law-abiding
Yes.
citizen. Where
It's a great movie.
Yeah, where at time, throughout the movie, it was thought that justice wasn't served because the guy got off for killing this guy's family. But by the end, Jamie Foxx is explaining to him, like this is how it goes, because we could have gone to trial. This could have not been proven, and he could have walked free anyway. So sometimes there's kind of this take a step back to take two steps forward approach with doing things in a more traditional legal way. And you may kind of get a certain verdict, but it's not going to be this complete one-to-one justice. And that's where that mindset comes into, you know, take things off the books, like you said, and be more of a vigilante.
Mm-hmm. And then I think the last little theme was about proving yourself and getting the chance to prove yourself. And I say that because, you know, even just thinking of Bass Reeves' situation, the fact that Judge Parker gave him the chance to prove himself and to do that job, and he was constantly kind of proving himself with each task that they had to do, or job, or I don't know what exactly you call those little missions he was on, but but yeah, with each task that he had to do, he was, you know, can you tangle with the big dogs? Can you like do what's necessary to get what you need to get done no matter what? So
And
yeah.
and that was, I think, indirectly passed on from Judge Parker giving Bass a chance to Bass giving Billy Crow a chance.
Exactly.
Billy Crow was a bit of street urchin, and he sees Bass act and sees what he represents and how he carries himself, and then that becomes something that Billy Crow wants. So he kind of like, let me do it. And I think Bass was maybe a little apprehensive at first. But he
Yes.
obviously eventually let him join on in his well, at first I just thought he was part of the posse, but obviously became clear he was a full-fledged marshal.
Right. And that's a lovely segue into the next category, which is relationships. Yeah. So you mentioned the kind of the relationship between Billy Crow and Bass. So I would definitely think that that's one of the most captivating connections that I saw. Just they do have an interaction where Bass is basically telling Billy, like, I don't think you're cut out to be a marshal.
Mm-hmm.
And so Billy Crow says, what, are you giving up on me? And he's like, no, I don't give up. Or, you know, he says something like that. And they have this whole interaction. And then the whole thing with the prostitute or saloon gal or whatever, you know, at the end where Bass gives Billy the diamond or whatever it is and says, hey, go get that gal of yours a ring. Like, because he realized that, you know, Billy Crow was really taken by this woman. So
I don't think that was a one night stand situation. I thought that I interpreted them as having a previous history, because she tells him about her father going out of the territory, being chased out of the territory.
oh, you think they knew each other beforehand?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was hard for me to tell. And I'm almost wondering if it was more of one of those situations where Billy Crow was kind of more into her than she was into him.
Yeah.
She was just like, all right, give me the ring, like pony up the money.
Well, you also, to tie the two things together, the Bass and Billy Crow relationship was very much an arc of maturation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if she had known Billy Crow for a long time, going back to they were kids, she probably knew he was a bit immature. So she's probably not not having seen him in a long time. She's probably just thinking he's the same Billy Crow,
Right.
and
That's
he
true.
wants to be out running around doing all these odd jobs, and, you know, not the type that's going to settle down and really commit to being a family.
So she might say, oh, well, you know, this is like, I'll get married, but this is the thing you have to do. She might think it's like, you know, when pigs fly kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you know, if he's actually taking it seriously. So yeah, I mean, they came to support each other, even though Billy Crow was a bit of a thorn in the side of Bass at first, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, was another thing about Bass for Billy Crow to aspire to, because he knows Bass was a committed family man and father, despite, you know, being away from the farm as much as he was.
Yeah. I mean, what would you say was your favorite connection or relationship to watch?
Well, a couple that I mean, you wrote down Bass and Judge Parker, which I kind of expanded upon, being that Cheryl Bass and Cheryl Lynn and Bass and Judge Parker, where they're kind of like unlikely allies. They like we touched on before, they do things differently, even though they're kind of
Yes.
going after the same goal. So that was one for me to notice that, like these are not one-to-one characters in this show, but they kind of still learn from each other. They still work together, even though Cheryl and Bass are trying to wring each other's throats half the time.
Right. It's that unlikely duo kind of thing. Like you see it's like you see those YouTube videos of a kitten playing with a cow. Like
Yeah.
it's like, oh, how are they getting along? Like they're so different. And that's what it constantly was. I mean, with Cheryl and Bass, it was like Cheryl was like, all right, let's burn this guy up. And then, Bass is just like, well, I don't want to do that. I think Bass started out really wanting to do things by the book, and Cheryl's kind of ruthless.
Yeah. So who's the cow and who's the kitten in this comparison?
Oh man. I don't know.
The one that I know you didn't note that I noticed a lot of was Jenny and Sally. Because without Bass there, they really have to rely on each other, as Sally's significantly older than all the other children.
Yes.
And especially in Arthur's courtship of Sally, there was kind of a lot of themes brought out about an often trivial relationship that a mother and a daughter can have, and especially in light of Bass's absence for lengthy periods of time.
Yeah.
Where like, especially when he's called off to do the Texas job to go after Jackson Cole, and that, like we said before, that is the principal reason why he's unable to take Sally to the carnival. And at first, Jenny was very apprehensive about Sally fraternizing with Arthur, to the point where when Arthur first came onto the scene, she told him she's not ready for this. You need to wait. You need to buy your time. And as soon as it was clear that Bass was going off on this Jackson Cole expedition of sorts, she told Sally, like, hey, you should go with Arthur to this, at least see what it's like to have a man in your life that sticks around, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's kind of every mother-daughter relationship, in the fact that the mother is just trying to protect the daughter. She doesn't want her to make mistakes, but the daughter takes that as, oh, like you're trying to stifle me. Like, how am I supposed to live my life? And like, that's literally how all teenage daughters are. So, yeah, they really had to hunker down and support each other. But it's hard when you're a teenage girl and you're just like, I just want to live my life. And my mom is putting a damper on what I'm trying to do. Like, so that's what I think definitely came across, is when Jenny was like, oh, are you hanging with that boy? Like, come on now.
Yeah, because you have the parent of the same gender as the child, and it's always a situation where they look at them, it's like, if the parent sees themselves as this established, mature type of person, they want the child to kind of be them and not really let the child kind of grow to that themselves.
Right. Or the parent is trying to kind of use it as a chance to do something different for themselves. They're trying to prevent their child from becoming like them. So her thought is probably like, listen, I don't want you, hanging out with this boy and then, getting pregnant at a young age, or, making things difficult for yourself. So she just, because she's in a situation where her husband is away, she's like, I just don't want my daughter to get in that situation like I did.
Yeah. And then the other one that was a big one for me, and it was a bit of an odd one to throw in this, because obviously they're adversaries, but Pierce his relationship with Bass, they had that interaction very early on. We're in the bar and they kind of saw each other as more kind of I don't want to say allies, but not adversaries. And then of course that he disappears for a little while. That leads to the Curtis situation, and then Bass is always searching for this man, for that type of vengeance or justice. And every time in the last 4 episodes or so, when they kind of had when Pierce kind of arose again and he handed Jackson Cole off to him, and all his visions that he was having, you kind of got the sense that these two are almost like a Batman and Joker relationship, where they're just meant to exist in each other's lives, but there's never any situation where one gets over on the other.
I was kind of thinking, I don't know if, and this is weird that I'm using this example because I'm not even a huge like Harry Potter thing, but I was gonna say like Harry Potter and Voldemort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh,
like
I'm sorry. He who shall not be named.
Yeah, the two of them had this very like unstoppable train versus a movable object type of relationship. Like these are two super powerful characters. They have the same type of base belief system. They just interpret different ways. So like to me, like I was like watching the end of the show wondering like are they ever going to have this clash to resolve this feud? Or is it just going to be some continuous thing that never ends because one party can't put themselves in a position to end the other party?
Yeah, it's almost like it's like they can't exist together, but they also can't exist without one another in a weird way.
Like the old thing, what they used to say about in-laws. Yeah, but like that was a big one for me. In not so much the traditional light that we usually talk about this subject as far as character dynamics and that sort of thing. But that was one that stood out to me.
Yeah, and I think we already mentioned like the adversary relationships, but I would say, going on that theme of like a traditional connection was, even though it was for a pretty short time that they interacted, just the relationship between Curtis and Bass, where
Yes.
Bass kind of just took Curtis under his wing and just immediately kind of had that connection with him.
And a young man that obviously did not have a male role model in his life. So he took to Bass almost immediately, to the point where he was fervently loyal in the moment of his demise. And Bass, you could see Bass's regret and anger over that, because he was trying to, still in that moment of extreme agitation with the raid, trying to get Curtis to make the right decision and not kill him. And the decision wound up backfiring.
Yeah, one of those tragic relationships.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about some quotes. So, Bass, he was often a man of few words. He always like, he always would grunt, like, blah, 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 blah. And but the funny thing is, there was, he didn't speak a lot, but when he did speak, there was a lot of weight in what he did say. So what were some of the quotes that stuck with you from this show?
Well, sticking with the theme of man of few words, or man of simple words,
Yeah.
he said 2 different quotes that were effectively the same message, but one was way early in the show, where he said, black, red, or white, we're all just men. And then way later in the show, when Edwin is trying to convince him to be a part of his push to take the Indian territory as kind of a free land for the freed slaves, he said, my job is to protect people, black, red, or white. And it was kind of this steady conscience that Bass had of this equal treatment under the law, regardless of who his audience was, whether he's talking to Cheryl and Judge Parker, whether he's talking to Edwin. It was just he used like this steady kind of compass rose.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I remember him saying the black, red, and white thing, but I didn't notice that he kind of repeated that. That's interesting.
And
that just shows that it's just a part of who he is.
yeah. And in a lot lighter note, I got a good chuckle out of when he was recruiting Garrett Montgomery to be part of his posse, and they were discussing what he was to be paid, and he told Bass that I'm gonna be the best $6 you ever spent.
I didn't notice that one.
Yeah. Now you had a couple Billy Crow ones. I had one that he says to Billy Crow when Billy Crow has his first killing, and he's having emotional distress over his decision to do that. And Bass says to him, like, every bullet either takes a life or saves one. So that's kind of like his rationale towards if you have to pull the trigger, you may be taking a life, but you're also probably saving another one at the same time.
Yeah, and that's just another example of how he, just says a couple words, but just conveys so much.
Then and that it's almost transferred down to by bloodline to Sally, because when Arthur leaves and he wants her to come with him, and she says, I'm not going anywhere. She says, Reeves don't run. So it's like she has kind of that same value instilled in her from Bass, even though Bass is not around all that often, that it's like, this is my place, this is my job to be here and help support this family and that sort of thing.
She
Like,
sticks to her guns just like her dad does. For sure.
I'm not gonna run away from confrontation.
Yeah. Oh, and I wanna you wrote down the quote that I was talking about. I didn't have the actual quote, but how Jenny was commenting on how, when he kind of made that whole scene when they were all there for dinner, he kind of acted like an a-hole, and she was commenting on how all of him wasn't present whenever he came home. So then we have like a full circle moment at the end where he says like he brought all of himself home, or he's bringing the right person home this time, or so. If you want to read the actual quote that you have.
Yeah, and I think I got this pretty close to verbatim, but she says, like, I ain't angry that you left. I'm just disappointed in the man you brought home. And she says a couple other words and said that it's less and less of you every time. So it's like and I thought this was significant not only because this kind of solidified their kind of estranged relationship in his elongated absences, but it was also interesting juxtaposed to how the dinner ended with Edwin, where you thought that Jenny was in Edwin and Esme's camp with furthering this kind of progression to get Black people this free land in this post-emancipation world. And as soon as it becomes clear that Edwin just wants Bass to be the face of his movement, Jenny tells him to kind of piss off and get out of the house.
Right. Yeah.
Just kind of a self-serving thing. So it's like all of a sudden this estranged relationship that Bass and Jenny have, in that moment, she is still super loyal to Bass and says, like, okay, I see right through you, Edwin. We're done. Get out of here.
Yeah. Even though her estranged husband was being kind of a jerk, she still was like, all right, well, he came home a jerk, but I'm still gonna have his back.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I had a couple funny ones. This was just not long after Bass was telling Billy Crow he didn't know that he had what it takes to be a marshal. When I think Bass was getting ganged up on, and Billy Crow saved him, and he goes, now that's how you aim, Billy Crow.
Yeah.
That was great.
Positive reinforcement.
yeah, that was really funny. And then I liked, again, getting back to the faith versus atheism, or whatever you want to call it. Cheryl is kind of musing, you still believe in a Lord that let you spend half your life in chains? And then Bass says, prayers don't hurt. How he grunts. And And then Cheryl tells him they don't help much neither. And that was just funny that they were, having to work together, even though they had such opposite views, they were butting heads on that. And then the last quote I had was when Bass was out in town, there was a little kid standing next to him, and he was saying that, oh, my dad, or he said, which are you? He asked Bass if he was a lawman or if he was an outlaw. And so I think Bass replies that he's a lawman. And the kid says, well, my dad says that lawmen and outlaws are one and the same. And I think Bass says something like, well, your dad's right. And I thought that whole interaction was interesting because, we were talking about how when you're a lawman, you're supposed to be honorable and you're supposed to do what's right. Yet, some of what you have to do is not by the book. So it's kind of a blurred line, right? As to like what's morally wrong and right. Sometimes you're kind of straddling the line, and Bass very much did that.
Yeah, sometimes to keep your own moral standing in your execution, you have to go and do some, not necessarily moral things to kind of keep the general arrow going in a proper direction, I guess.
Right.
So it's very much that compass kind of, like he's a compass rose, but sometimes the compass rose doesn't always point due north.
It's very deep.
Sometimes it happens.
Yeah, sometimes you just come out with these nuggets.
Yeah.
So overall, what did you think of this show? So, okay, first of all, do we want to address whether Taylor Sheridan, did he do well this time? Did he redeem himself? And then just what did you think of the show in general?
I mean, I think he did a good job of it, or at least as good a job as he could have done with it, because it being more of an adaptation as opposed to his usual stuff, which is a little more fictional in nature. I think he did fine, but like maybe he was the square peg in the round hole. So maybe like something that's an adaptation isn't Taylor Sheridan's cup of tea. I generally liked the show. I just thought it took a while to build up. Like to me, it really didn't start getting going until episode 5, episode 6. And I feel like a lot of people now with, the attention spans that are present in today in modern society, they're going to give up on this before they're done with episode 3 or 4.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people did, just based on the reviews that I read. But yeah, I mean, my takeaway as far as Taylor Sheridan was at least it wasn't woke this time.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, you win some, you lose some, but at least it wasn't woke this time. And this doesn't really fit in anywhere. I just wrote this. I don't know if you noticed this or if I'm the only, I don't know what to call it, but there was the same transition that's used in like all of Taylor Sheridan shows. I don't know if you know what I mean, but I would call it either like an explosion or like a bass drum. It's instead of like just transitioning, like when they, say something like, leaving you on a cliffhanger or something, they do like a, do you know what I mean?
Oh, maybe. I noticed it a lot with the music at the end. The music at the end, like after he was freeing Jackson Cole and they're walking across the plains, and the music started to kind of make me think Yellowstone a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure he does it on I may have seen it on Tulsa King or Mayor of Kingstown. Is that what it's called? I know for sure I've seen it on Yellowstone. But yeah, it's this like boom. But it's really quick, and it's like as it like not fades to black, but as it changes scenes, it's just this like low, like really low, really deep noise, and then it's just And I haven't seen anyone call
change.
this out before, so I just wanted to bring that up. But
Well, I mean, directors, producers, they usually have some kind of calling card, so it's not
yeah, and I
it's
mean,
not completely out of the woodshed.
he was the executive producer this time. I'm not sure if he was a writer for special ops. But that also might, control how much say he has over a show, like if he's writing something versus if he's executive producing something. So I'd be interested to see if, the things that we thought were woke, was it
They're really
because,
his decisions.
right?
Yeah.
Like how much direct impact did he have over the storyline or things that happened, I wonder.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, like we said before, I'm glad, big name actors rushed towards him because we both noted that the acting in this was very top notch. It's got a couple
Yes.
Golden Globe nominations. And even perpetual Hollywood side pieces like Barry Pepper put in a very good above average to very good performance.
Yeah, I saw Pepper mentioned. Who was that?
Pierce. I saw Pierce.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, he looked, what's he from though? Because he looked so familiar.
The side role in every single movie you can imagine. Every action movie, every action or sci-fi movie you can imagine, he's 7 times out of 10 a side role.
Yes,
Insignificant side role, but he's there.
I definitely feel like I've seen him before, but I didn't know where. And that was actually one actor I did not look into further on IMDb.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the first role that popped in my head was Battlefield Earth. So I'm sure Barry Pepper would not be appreciative of that.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I'll have to look up his filmography and erase that from my mind.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, that's one thing I will say is it was very well acted. But that being said, it didn't really have a driving force or a plot. It was very slow moving at times. There were a few time jumps where it skipped ahead a few years or a time period. Within the first few episodes, it skipped a couple times. And then I would say, we're on episode 8. Sorry, it was my least favorite one so far that we've
worse
covered.
Than Lioness. Oh, worse than Lioness?
Yeah, I would say Lioness was actually captivating to watch for a few episodes or a handful of episodes. Like it was good until episode 6 before it went to garbage. So yeah, I would say that this was my least favorite. And I just want to point out too, this is one of the few times, especially with something that we've covered, but one of the few times ever that I fast forwarded a love scene because I was just so grossed out. So with the first episode, there's, a love scene with Bass and his wife. And I don't know what it was, but it was just like a Scooby-Doo love scene. Like I could not, it was just so slobbery. Like I just was like, what is this? I couldn't bear to watch it. So that was just one of those odd things that I was like, what were they thinking? What was the direction with this scene? But yeah, I think, I think the issue was that the show never gripped me the whole time. I mean, maybe in the last like 2 episodes, things kind of picked up, but then things just started happening very fast. And yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just not for me. I did like 1883 and 1923, but this one was just not for me.
Yeah, it was too much of a slow build up. It had a very fast payoff, but it took a long time to get there. So that I enjoyed the payoff, but it kind of felt like it was a little bit too late, and I was like not totally engaged up until that point.
Yeah, maybe the issue was that they're just trying to cover way too much ground as far as, Bass Reeves' background and the history of what really happened. So, I mean, they have confirmed that this will be an anthology series. So each season will be a different lawman character, I'm assuming. So I would give another season a chance. Like, that's not to say that every season is going to be this slow or not have a plot, or, you know, I definitely would give it another chance.
And that's good, because that's what I kind of thought it was going to be. Just noticing different little things about the title. They pluralized lawmen. They put a colon after it. So I got the sense that this was probably intended to be like a True Detective thing, where every season features a different agent of law enforcement, and I think that's an interesting way to do it. So I would be excited to. I would not give up on the series as a whole after this, and I would be excited to see what the next one, what that take is. Yeah,
so we'll see which historical figure they're going to cover for the second season. I would assume that it's going to be, you know, a year or so before we see that, but obviously, you know, I'm up for covering whatever they throw at us next. So we'll see.
Which era. It could be anywhere from World War I to World War II to Civil Rights era to it could be anything across the map. So
right. And I could definitely be into whatever that one is. So not crossing off the list yet. So, well, make sure you follow along with both of us on Instagram and TikTok. It's binge.the.ginge with dots between the words on Instagram. And then on both, Nutmeg, the number 2, Palmetto, as in the bug. Give us both follows and stay tuned to the show on all of our platforms: YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Until the next real review, Red and Red signing out.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What?
Do what?
I'd like to be pimps from Oakland or cowboys from Arizona, but it's not Halloween.
Let the dogs out, you know, like, who let the dogs out? Who brought this guy along?
Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
Grow up, Peter Pan. Count Chocula.
X never, ever marks the spot.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
You did. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
No. Why not? Do. Or do not. There is no try.
All right. Then you do us proud. Because I don't want no scrubs.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness. You weren't on any mercy mission.
Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? None but love, boy. None but love, boy.
10. X marks the spot.
Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Blow up! Peace!
Smile, you son of a...
Toodaloo, motherfucker.
Hey, you ain't too proud to beg.
Come on.
What?
It's not funny anymore.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not trying to
see
be
references.
Still, nothing. I swear to you.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.